Well, welcome to episode 7 of Rugby League United, and one of the big names in coaching is our guest this week, England coach throughout, 5 years or so on a World Cup. He's been in the NRL and now he's just shown me a gorgeous scene in the south of France with the Catalans Dragons. Steve McNamara, the Dragons head coach. Great to see you. How are you?
Yeah, really good, George. Yourself?
Yeah, all right, okay. It's been strange for us over here. Has it been any different for you over there?
Well, I've actually experienced both. When the lockdown first started, the confinement in France, I stayed in France. Obviously, I don't think any of us knew how long it would be, and I wasn't going to come back straight away. So it was very, very strict in France initially. The rules around where you could travel, 1 kilometre zones, and the police stopping you everywhere. And quite clearly, once it became evident that it was going to go on for some time, I actually managed to get back to England and spend some time with the family because, my situation is, my family are back in England. They're doing their studies. My daughter's at university, and my son's just finishing his A-levels. And so my wife's back there looking after them. So it was good for me in some regards to get back and spend some time in England, but now back in the south of France, and it's very hot.
And how is that? You mentioned your offspring and the time in their lives. I remember that being a very stressful time in my lives, as it was with A-levels and university. Throw in something like this. How have they coped with that?
Oh, they've been great. They've been good. They're pretty sensible kids. They got dragged to the other side of the world when they were 12 and 13. Which was tough ages for us to take them to Australia, to the Southern Hemisphere. It's an age group there where you're really creating bonds and friends at high school and doing well in your education. So they're pretty resilient kids. They got took to Australia. They had a great period of time across there. They've sort of learned to deal with those types of situations. And frustrating as an 18 and a 19-year-old where you should be going out doing what 18 and 19-year-olds should be doing. But no, it's been good for me and for them to spend some time with each other because we don't get that much of it. And we haven't over the last probably 3 or 4 years. And
how have your players been through this? I'm sure desperate to get Super League back as you are. You're a lad from Hull in the south of France. You've got a group of French guys there, but you've got players from all over the world who are locked down away from home. How has that been for them?
Yeah, I think on a whole, really good. They've dealt with it really well. Each individual is different. You're correct. You've got the French-based players with all the families around them, close to them and everything else. Then you've got families from England, so they're not too far, but they're within touching distance. You then get your families from the Southern Hemisphere, who are a long, long way, and obviously the rules restricting travel from the Southern Hemisphere look like they may be in place for a while. And then we've actually got a couple of single boys as well, which is, that's even more difficult for them. Josh Drinkwater, for example, young English guy, his girlfriend's in Australia, and he literally was trapped in his own apartment. So on the whole, they've dealt with it really, really well. It's been pleasing. I've come back and I've been able to see everybody, get around and see everybody, not just the players, but the partners and the families, and just to check in on everybody, because not only has the confinement been a period that I've had to get through, for us as a travelling team, we may need to go through some other adversity, particularly at the start of the season, if we have to travel and play in England for the first month or so.
Yeah, just tell me a little bit about that before we kind of broaden the talk out. When Super League is back, it's going to be very different for the Dragons. I was thinking about this last night, thinking actually your job is probably unique in Super League, even from Toronto, who are largely based in the northwest of England. You're going to be doing it completely different. Yeah,
look, nobody's still exactly sure, are they? And even over the weekend, some rules got relaxed in France regarding playing matches. From I think it's July the 11th, you can actually play games in France now with a limited crowd of 5,000 people. That's fantastic news. It's great news, not only for us, but great news, I feel, for the whole competition, because I think England's generally a couple of weeks behind what happens in France. So, look, there's loads of planning being put in place by the Super League, by the RFL, by the clubs. We've said we're prepared to do whatever we need to do. If the rules and the quarantine and the circumstances mean we have to come and stay in England for a period of time, we'll do that. If we can fly in and out on the day of a game, we'll potentially do that. Could be used commercial. We've explored that. So we've explored all of the options, and we've got plans in place for each of those scenarios. We've now got to set another plan up because it looks like we can play at home at certain times of the year. So all we can do is be ready for whatever the decision is made at the time, and then we pick the right choice based on that. But yeah, as you can imagine, in the height of this, it was looking like we would probably have to come and stay in England and be situated in England for a long period of time. A little bit like the New Zealand Warriors are in Australia, and that creates problems more for the families. You know, we've got a lot of, a fair few players whose wives are pregnant, girlfriends are pregnant. We've got a lot of families away from the support mechanisms. We've got young children, so making sure we were across all of that as a club has been important during this lockdown period.
None of this kind of thing would have been in the job description when you signed up, but I sense talking to you, you take most things in your stride. Are you that kind of person who like throw me a curveball and I'll deal with it, or behind the scenes is it different?
I think we all learn. I think we all go through experiences, and I've had lots of experiences to fall back onto, different types of experiences. Maybe not so much this one, but no, I think we all develop as time. So maybe if this ever come 15 years back, I might have looked at it in a different light. But literally in this, there is nothing nobody can do. It's to sit back, wait, make sure you plan, make sure you're organised, have all your different scenarios, and just have the ability to change on the run. And coaching's a bit like that. Like you prepare for a game, you prepare all week, you look at the opposition, you've got all this time to prepare, and then on game day, in the second minute, you lose your front rower to an injury, and all your plans go out the window, and you have to adapt and change quickly. You don't have that time to think. So a bit similar to that in some regards, but we're ready. Whatever we get told to do, we'll go and do it.
So you're a controllables guy.
Hopefully, but we all have our moments. We all have our moments, don't we?
Yeah. We certainly do. Let's talk a little bit about you. I've known you for quite a few years. I've got a sense of what kind of person you are, but I'm learning so much through this series of podcasts. First of all, we'll talk a little bit about your playing career as well. What kind of coach do you think you are?
I think I like to care about the players. Certainly like to put that first. I like to put trust in the players. I like them to have trust in us. I'm not one of these coaches who wants to set up fine systems. If you're late, this happens to you. If you misbehave, this happens to you. I just think that if you put those sorts of things in place, you're forever dealing with situations. My philosophy is get the right people in, trust them, back them. If they misbehave, if they consistently can't stay to the standards, then remove them from the group rather than just simple little fans. And I think that's that when you that type of you've got that type of system in place where you're just forever finding people or whatever it may be, then you're continually going to get some issues. So a little bit of trust in that. But I was really fortunate in terms of my coach education. My dad was a coach of coaches, so he the guy would sort of do the coaching courses and educate coaches to be coaches. And I think what is really important is your very first impression as a professional, as a player. And as a 17-year-old, I had Brian Smith, who was my coach, and still to this day is the most intelligent rugby league coach I've ever been involved in. His knowledge of the game is incredible. He would teach the players the A to Z, if you like, of rugby league. You knew everything about the game, and that, in my opinion, is why a lot of these players who he has coached have gone on to be coaches, because they've got a really broad knowledge of the game. But I think as I've developed as a coach going onwards from that knowledge, I've started to narrow down my focus and really concentrate on not the A to Z, understand all of that, but really understand the parts of the game, what wins games now, and try and coach our team in that direction.
Yeah, so it's more about you're kind of more personable than scientific. Would that be too much of a generalisation?
Yeah. Look, I was fortunate when all of my learning initially was tacit. It was on the job learning. I was a player. I was an ex-player. I'd had a good upbringing, a decent upbringing. Obviously, with my dad being a coach educator, first grade coach. All of my learning was done on that. But when I got the England job, it opened up a little bit of space. I did the level 4 coaching certificate, went off to UCLan University, started to look at some of the science side of it, and really got a nice knowledge of the other side of the game, the other people's perspective to the game, the science side of it. And so I think that, again, was a great opportunity for me at that stage to experience something that earlier in my career I hadn't been fortunate to do that, because a lot of players now go from school straight into play. And I went from school into working. but never down that educational route. So I did enjoy it.
The upbringing side of things fascinates me. It's been a theme, actually, an unexpected theme that's come through on this series. We've had examples of, tough upbringings moulding experience. Dennis Betts the other week was, talking about, largely tongue in cheek about how he learned to be evasive because he was fleeing gangs in Salford. But you kind of got the, got the impression of what he was talking about. He had to grow up and be a man very quickly. Reece Lynn said a very similar thing, but they were talking about their response as a human being to a negative upbringing. You just mentioned there that yours was very, very positive. So how did that mould you as a person to have that kind of?
Yeah, I was lucky. I was in a working class family. It's not nothing. There's nothing special there in terms of finances. My dad was a tool maker. My mum worked in a factory, but it was a stable upbringing. The family was together. We didn't come from a split family. We lived in an okay area, which was good. And things went okay, went okay for me. I played for England schoolboys under 16s and for a couple of years at that. And then I got signed professional and I made my debut quite early and everything was going really well. And then suddenly, I remember, nothing really had gone wrong in my career. Everything was going well. And then I got dropped for the semi-final. It was the old Premiership semi-final and the final. I was 19 and I got replaced by Dean Busby, a young lad who was a year younger than me, 18, for the semi-final and the final. And it's like the first real sort of shock adversity. Everything was going well for me. And then I missed out on the two of the biggest games. I missed out on the final, winning the final. And I think for me, that came at the right time. I think you do need to overcome some obstacles, some hurdles. You do need some bumps along the way. You do need some things when things are going really well and you think you're untouchable to bring you back down. And that certainly was an occasion for me. There was things there in your life. What happens? Your grandparents die, and you've got to overcome those things. But in terms of professional career, that was a real eye opener for me.
Danny Maguire said something pretty similar when he had that season when he burst onto the scene, the 03 with the cup semi-final. And a week later he got dropped for the final, and he went and sat in the empty stand in Headingley and had a cry about it, and then had to get on the coach to go down and be part of the trip. Be 18 man, be water boy. And he said that actually was the best thing that ever happened, because from then on in, every major final, and there were plenty that Leeds were involved in, he worked his backside off to make sure he was first name on that team sheet. So something like that never ever happened to him again.
That's absolutely right. He's nailed it there. And that's exactly what happened to me. I wasn't fortunate to play in as many finals as Danny and get that opportunity after that. But it was a tremendous lesson for me. And at that stage, when that happened, it was when we used to play in the winter in England, and you could then go to Australia and play for a short spell. And I'd missed the semi-final, the final. It was the end of the season. All those feelings Danny went through. But then I got the opportunity to go to Australia for 3 months. So rather than sit and sulk in England and wait for the pre-season, I actually got out there, took myself out of my comfort zone in a huge way. As a 19-year-old, went across there on my own and played lower grades at St George. And learned some things across there, not only on the field, but off the field, of how to conduct yourself, how to behave, how to look after yourself, all the things that you experience in a normal life. A sportsman's life isn't normal, but I experienced some of those and came back a more rounded person and ready to overcome, like I said, that first major obstacle in my professional career.
Was getting out, the ability to get out of your comfort zone, something that has always been natural to you? I don't know, as an adventurer, or is it something that you've learned that it always works out okay? Because you've done it, you've gone to the other side of the world. You mentioned earlier on, you left your kids and went and challenged yourself in Australia, and here you are, kind of pretty much on your own in the south of France. You're not afraid to do stuff like that?
No, but it wasn't natural. For me, it wasn't natural. For some people, it is, and that's the different types of personality traits. But I don't know whether you know many kids from Hull, but most of us, we get a nosebleed if we have to go across the Leeds. If we have to stay for a night out somewhere else, we don't like it. That's our sort of general nature. We're from Hull, we're very insular. We look after ourselves, we look after each other. The city gets a lot of criticism, but we protect it, and we're sort of that type of people. But no, for me, it was really important, really, really important. That, there's been a few times in my career where I did leave Hull. Obviously, went to Australia as a young player. I left Hull to go sign for Bradford, and then not really returned to the city since then in terms of professional environment. Yeah, my base is there. You know, my family's sort of based around there. But from that point, being able to you know, make decisions, and you know, the decisions you regret in life are the ones you don't make, not the ones that you do. And you know, I feel that I've made some big decisions. You know, some big decisions, not just on a professional level, but on a family level as well. You've got to get that balance right. But yeah, I'd encourage anybody to go for it. Really.
Why don't more of us do it? I was, when we were recording the podcast last month with Ryan Hall, and he was reclining on his sofa in Sydney, and you know, showing me before we started recording, like, you know, his view and things like that. I'm thinking, what a life that is. And what stops people from making that?
We often look at, I'll use Catalans as an example. I really wanted to coach Catalans Dragons. I was loving life in the NRL. Like, it was, you know, I was so happy. I would not have, you know, come back for many jobs. But when the Catalan jobs came up, it was one of those intriguing prospects, different culture, different language. It was so different to anything else in the world, in Super League or the NRL. And in the past, I would have asked too many questions about the job. I would have found out too many things that I didn't like the knowledge of, and it maybe would have stopped me, prevented me from taking that opportunity. Now, you've got to do your research. You've got to understand what you're going into. But sometimes we find things to stop ourselves doing things all the time. You know, or we do that with players. We, you know, as coaches, a lot of coaches will look at a player and go, can't pick him because he can't do this and he can't do that. Yeah, but look what he can do. You know, look at the positive side of it. And that's probably one of the big things there for me is even when coming, and it's going off subject slightly, but even when you come into a place like the Dragons, when you can't speak the language to most of the group of players that you've got, how do you get your message across? How do you get that connection across as a coach and a player to a player? Because you have to get trust within that. And for me, it was about positive coaching, looking at the positives, we weren't playing great as Catalans, but for a spell of 5 minutes, that's what we like. That's what we're looking for. Look how good that looks for 5 minutes, and then making that go to 15 minutes, 40 minutes, 80 minutes eventually. So, yeah, I think we just quite often we look at the things that we can't do or the things that are negative as opposed to actually look what you actually have got. We all do it.
Oh, absolutely. We all do. And I'm fascinated to try and understand why we do, why our natural instinct is that. And it's kind of similar. I mean, we're kind of wired to take or dwell on the negative, aren't we? And I always look back, and I mentioned your kids before, I always look back to when I was doing exams, and I might have absolutely blitzed an exam, but I'd walk away thinking of the questions I got wrong.
Yeah.
Rather than the 95% I might have got right. Well, I never got that, but you know what I mean? The stuff I never got right.
Yeah.
That'd be on my head.
Yeah. And, you know, similar. But, and again, when we made the decision to go to Australia, you're talking about a 12 and a 13-year-old, and they were bright kids, they're intelligent kids. You know, Grace is studying to do medicine now. You know, she's done well, but we thought, what's going to happen? We'll take them there, or look at all the negatives of doing it. We might mess their education up, but let's go. We decided to do it. Let's make the gamble. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's see what happens on the back of it, and it's a decision that we'll never regret.
We'll explore in a sec a couple more of aspects of those moves and those coaching moves. We've not really discussed much about your playing career, but it was fairly impressive. Over 100 games for both Hull and Bradford, and then there was Wakefield and Huddersfield as well. How do you reflect on your career as a player, or do you think you're just known as a coach now?
No, I really enjoyed my career, my playing career. You know, it's brilliant. You know, you've got responsibilities, but to yourself and to your teammates, you know, and it's not until you go into the coaching world that you understand how much effort and work goes into putting that team together. So, love my playing career. Had some incredible experiences, met some incredible people along the way. Some people had some big influences. You know, I used to love playing when I first started at Hull FC with the old A team, the reserves, which is a big sort of subject now. And you know, people like Steve Crooks had come down and play with us, and we'd play against Brendan Hill or some of the old names. I know a lot of people might not know some of these names, but you know, just some of the influences you got from some older people and the experiences you learn. And I love playing, going to Bradford. You know, playing for my hometown club and captaining them was sensational. Going to Bradford at the start of that summer Super League period, 1996, was 4 incredible years of playing there. A bit of a sour year at Wakefield, and it just wasn't right for me, and it wasn't right for them, and the club went into administration and everything. And then finished at Huddersfield, and I've got to say, at Huddersfield, it was tough initially. We got relegated, but the year in the Championship, which was the one year I had outside of the top division, in some ways was as good a year as we'll ever have. The camaraderie, the group sticking together, the achievements coming back into Super League was good. And so to finish one year in Super League was great. And then the opportunity to start to get into coaching had started to happen probably a year earlier. But I took it, I think it was 2004, to go to Bradford.
You know what? That's Earl Crabtree on the first episode of this series said exactly that. Like, of all the things he's done in his career, and like playing for England against Australia and national anthems and all that, he said best season of my life was that Northern Ford Premiership season. When I got promoted with my mates. That's how we put it.
He's nailed it again. It was. I think Andy Rice, who played in that squad, it was his 40th birthday the other day, and we all did a video message for him and everything else. And it was. We weren't in the top flight. We were travelling to your Whitehavens and your Barrows. We was doing all of that type of stuff, but it was just something about it that we'd actually, we'd failed the year before, only by a small margin. We'd mostly stuck together. We'd all took wage reductions. We were all on the back foot of it, but we bounced back, and we bounced back in spectacular fashion. And it was something special for the club and for the town. You
listed some of the big names who were in the dressing room when you walked in first as a young teenager. I was struck by Dennis Betts saying when he walked into that iconic Wigan dressing room in the 80s as a 17-year-old from Salford, he said he wasn't in awe of anyone because he didn't know who anyone was. But you clearly were. Were you a guy who had kind of heroes and idols when you were growing up? Did you?
Yeah. Growing up, I grew up following Hull FC in the 80s. And they were a great team then. And your Steve Nortons, the Kiwi came, Gary Kemble, Fred Acoy, James Luluwai, did say Gary Kemble didn't know. Yeah, James Luluwai, Fred Acoy. They were great. Peter Sterling came across, so it was a fantastic time to be an Hull FC fan, and when you're 11 through the age of 14 and you're following that team around and they're winning everywhere. So, but that had really gone by the time I arrived at Hull FC. It was a rebuilding phase. Brian Smith had gone in there, and it was more for me. My first, I played at Bradford on a debut away, but the first home game was against that Star-Studded Wigan side. With Sean Edwards, Dennis Betts, they were all in. It was really the England Great Britain team splattered with people like Kevin Arrow, from overseas. So that was probably the moment when you look up and you go, "Wow, this is special."
When you come into, another thing we've got into on this is the transition out of being a professional sportsman, and obviously that can be a very traumatic life event for a lot of sportsmen and women of any sport. Is the what next, and how do you replace that buzz, that adrenaline, that purpose, that focus? When you were coming towards the end of your career, how aware were you that you were coming towards the end of your career, and how much in your head while you were still playing were you planning, right, what do I do next with my life?
Yeah, I think for myself, as much as I loved my playing career, I was looking forward to the next stage, which hopefully was going to be coaching. So I sort of, from that early age, that early upbringing into that education from Brian Smith, I really enjoyed coaching. So at an early age, I would train and play for Hull FC, but help go back and scale in my amateur club, go back and help out there and do a little bits around there. And all my mates would stay, all my mates were groups still there, so I'd go back there. And I just felt that I knew I wanted to be a coach from an early age. I wanted to do that. So for me, it wasn't as traumatic. I think this last 3 months has given us all a perspective of when there's no real adrenaline in your life, when there's no, it's the first time, since I've probably been 17, 18, where I've had that period of time of stillness, that of nothing happening, and probably feeling like retirement, where there's no real reason to get up. There's nothing really you need to do. There's nothing you can do because you can't go to the shops. And actually, that's been really good to a certain level, but that adrenaline, and it's dangerous, that adrenaline of the highs and the lows, of winning, of losing, is probably what keeps a lot of us in sport alive and ticking over. So it's something that, it's made me reflect and think during this period about if that wasn't there, how would you replicate that? How would you find that in a different area?
Did you find any answers?
I found the mountain bike and just took off on rides and challenge yourself. And I don't know, it's maybe a bit of a competitive thing. You do a ride and you're going to try and beat the time the next time, or you're going to try and extend the distance next time. How far can you go? And I don't know, you play sort of games in yourself with your own man, but no, it's difficult. It's difficult. And it's something, what is a dangerous thing for people involved in sport. We've seen it so many times. I know you're heavily involved in this sort of area, George. It's a really, really dangerous thing because it's like a drug. Being involved in sport is like a drug. It is the emotional highs and lows are there, and they're there every single week. And we've had that taken away from us for a period now. So it'll be interesting to see how a lot of people have developed over that period.
And is that why you think we do unfortunately have so many players, not just in rugby league, across sport, who have that real dip and that real struggle in their wider lives, when what has been their focus, their drive, their purpose for so long is suddenly, overnight it just goes. And that's not just in sport. Major change in anyone's life can have that effect on them.
Yeah, it can. Any of that. And we spoke a little bit earlier on about something major happening in your life. We've got one of our players now who's just lost somebody who was really close to him, and it's the first death, if you like, that he's experienced. He's never known anybody close to him die before, and those types of scenarios, you've got to deal with them. But it's dangerous. There's a number of reasons. I don't know what the exact reason or whether there's one reason, but the kids come straight from school now straight into professional environments. I feel I was fortunate that I went to a working environment for probably 4, 5, 6 years first before I went into full-time professional environment. And I think that helps to understand the perspective and what else is out there and what you can do and not do. I think our players now, and it's great that they can come into and develop into professional athletes straight away. That is everything that they've got. And then if, like you say, if they finish at the age of 33, 34, some of them a little bit younger, it's like retirement at that point. And when you're retired at the age of 65 or 68, 67, whatever it may be now, well, that's fine because you've lived most of your life and you want to spend some time and relax. But at that young age, what happens next? And it's something that I know a lot of people do a lot of work on. It's something that needs to continually be done because there's so many pitfalls for the players. Would they live a great life? They have a great opportunity. They earn good money for a period of time, but life after that can be difficult for them.
Is that something we can only, do you think, through experience, help people with? From a personal point of view, I felt a little bit like that the last couple of years, looking around thinking, the world's getting on without me. How do I get myself back into life? And I know I've spoken to a lot of sports people and said, well, that's kind of how it feels when your career, comes to, when your sporting career comes to an end. So how do we make sure that is, I guess, a softer transition, a more manageable period for players who give so much, especially to rugby league, which is so brutal?
Yeah, I don't know the exact answer. I think, like you said, a lot of the work that is getting done is the right type of work. There's certainly more awareness of it now, isn't there? Because surely I'm saying maybe these problems worked back then, back when the players were amateur and they were part-time and everything else. But the advent of professional sport maybe has changed the dynamics of it. So I think maybe we are still quite young in terms of learning through it. These players in rugby league are not earning enough money to 99% of them to retire at the end of it, particularly in England, and be safe and be comfortable for the rest of their life. So they have challenges. It's really different when you think about it. In a normal job on the street, you start working at 18, 19, 20, whatever it may be, and you're on a low salary. And as you but you're single, you've got no responsibilities. And then as you grow up, you meet a partner, you eventually have children, your salary's going in the same direction generally because you're building your career. When you're a professional rugby league player, you actually get quite often quite decent money at a younger age. You've still not got the responsibilities, but when you eventually meet your partner and you start to have children, your salary can be reduced massively. My salary when I stopped playing and went into coaching dropped by 2/3 And at that stage, I had 3 children to support. Whereas at the early start of my career, when there was no children to support and I was earning good money, it was a different. So it's a really strange sort of setup sometimes. The time when you really need your money, you think your career is going to go forward, and that's when the rugby league players finishes. And there's some little pitfalls there for people to deal with.
For sure. So that transition for you was into coaching, and you had what, 4 years at Bradford, 06 through to 010, was it, as head coach?
Well, I had some time as assistant coach first.
Yeah.
A couple of years under Brian Noble, off to 2004 and 5, and I think it was during 6, wasn't it, when I think Brian left to go to Wigan, and then went through to 2010.
So what did you learn off Nobby in that period before you stepped into his shoes?
Look, Nobby's been a really successful coach. His record speaks for itself. But probably learned that he got out at probably just about the right time. I think the club was in what I wasn't sure was it was in pretty much financial distress at that stage. I remember taking the job as head coach, and within 10 days, I think we'd sold Stuart Field, and we had to sell him for, I think it was £400,000 to keep afloat.
I remember, yeah.
And the cracks were there, and everything else that was starting to appear. So, but I would never have not made that decision again. It was a tough experience. I did have some other options at that time, but I think coaching that group, and they were a great group of players, and we clung on for as long as we could, and we replaced Stuart Fielding with Sam Burgess, which we knew he was coming through, but then we had to sell Sam on as well, to again stay alive. So I think timing was a big one there for Nobby, and certainly the good experiences there, really good experiences as a player, as an assistant coach, some really good ones as an head coach. But yeah, it was eventually time to move on and try something different.
As first coaching jobs go, that must have been huge. Dennis Betts, when I asked him about his time at Widnes, how did he put it? He said most of the time he was fixing broken toys. Yeah, was how he put his time at Widnes. There was a lot wrong then, but I mean the uncertain financial backdrop must have entirely influenced.
Yeah, we still had a good squad initially, and we had a decent squad all the way through. We tried our best, but it was just getting thinner and thinner, and players were leaving. Before that, Jamie Peacocks had left, Leon Price had left. A lot of the big players, Paul Anderson had left. What was the backbone of the team at that time? James Lawes had retired, and it was a difficult sort of period managing, but it was all based on as you said, the financial backdrop, and in the horizon, every week, every month was a struggle for the club, and eventually it became too much, over a long period of time, and they've still faced that problem to this day. Still, really, just starting to try and get themselves back on the feet.
And that period for you personally, that would have been the first time that you would have really got proper criticism as well, because I remember, despite everything that you've outlined, the circumstances you were working under, it's always the head coach's fault, and I remember it was for you. You got a lot of criticism when you were in charge of that Bradford.
Yeah, because fans don't. It's not their job to understand exactly everything that's happening behind. Their job is to go and support the team. Their job is to cheer the team on. They're to be excited when they win and disappointed when they lose. So they're not really interested too much in everything else what's happening behind the scenes. It was extremely difficult to navigate that club the best that we could, and we clung on for as long as we could, and we were close on a few occasions to making a final, making the Challenge Cup final, etc. So we were close on a few occasions, but it's not their job. That's what I say. It's not their job to understand all the detail. That's why they're a fan, and I fully understand some of that, and it's part of the job.
Do you think everything that you've just kind of told me, do you think their attitude, the fans' attitude, would be any different if they knew all that, or were they just thinking, you're the first coach who didn't get us to the playoffs, which I think was right, or the worst run in, however, can't remember what it was, but I remember they're the things at the time they were saying about Bradford and about your Bradford.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know, but like I said, you had the success, and I was part of some of that success. So they really enjoyed it, and so I'd never criticise anybody there at the club. But there was some huge reasons, and maybe for another time to go into some more of that detail and everything else. But it's part and parcel, simple as that. So move on.
I asked you if you knew when your time was coming to an end as a player. Did you know at Bradford when you were coaching them did you know that something had to give?
Well, I took the England job full time. I'd already accepted that job, and the club knew that. So at the end of the 2010 season, I was leaving Bradford and going full-time England coach. So in the backdrop, they knew that was happening. And I think just before the end of that season, there was this. We made a decision there that it's probably best that I went in that direction now and let the club try and move on. But I don't regret anything. I know we did an incredible job at Bradford in that period, given those circumstances. We did an incredible job with that group. The club was just in a complete financial mess, and was finding it really, really difficult to deal with that. So, like I said, I have no regrets on it whatsoever, and learned so much from it.
When we talk about kind of, I guess, not career changes, but gear changes is what I wanted to say, and shifts to go from what you were doing at Bradford to, oh blimey, I'm the head coach of the national team. Yeah, what a move that is.
Yeah, well, you see, I've been fortunate. I was the assistant coach to Tony Smith, and I'd seen the difficulties that Tony had faced. Again, not mistakes, just difficulties. I saw the difficulties of what a national team had faced, as I had seen a little bit at Bradford as it was coming to Brian Nobles, and some of the problems were starting to surface. But with England, it was different. With England, it's not a team that you coach every single day. With England, it's different about the dynamics. And so I feel I was really fortunate seeing that before I went into it, because then I could try and implement some plans to rectify some of those situations that Tony faced. He never got the chance to do that. So I was fortunate. If I'd have come in from the outside, I'd have maybe done exactly the same, and maybe would have got the same result. But that period in charge of England, I think we turned it into a real, what we call a two-team mentality. Players who didn't, would say they played for Leeds, they played for Wigan, they played for Bradford, St Helens, whoever, started to believe that they played for two teams, England and Leeds, England and St Helens, England and Wigan, that they played for two teams. And we created a really, really great bond amongst that group. Developed the programme so much in terms of professionalism, standards, in terms of training facilities, what we provided the group, and made it a pretty special place.
I remember, I'm just thinking back to what Earl Crabtree was saying about England. He did say when he walked in there was that cliquey club mentality. Was that something you were aware of and you wanted to fix?
Yeah, the clubs were. It was all about your clubs. It was the ferocity, and we've got it in England. It's one of our strengths. That tribalism. That I'm from St Helens, and I remember one of the first meetings with England, and we were trying to get to, when I was head coach, and we were getting to the bottom of all of this. And we were toing and froing, and we were talking about stuff. And I think it was Kevin Sinfield that put his hand up first and said, "Look, I'll be honest with you. I'm from Leeds, and I've got some stuff what I keep to myself, and I don't really share it with the rest of you because I want to protect Leeds." And then James Graham stood up and went, "Well, I'll tell you, and the way James said, I'm from St Helens, and I look after St Helens, and that's my number one priority." Bang, and that was it. It opened the door. It opened the door for everyone to be honest and create that, and that's what we were. That's what it was. That's what the England team was at the time. It was you played for your club, and then once or twice a year you'd get a phone call off the coach. "Well done, you've been picked to play for England." You'd go along for a few days, play the game, and disappear. And we had to break that down. We had to start. That was the process. How do we break that? How do we make them really want to be part of that team, that they feel part of that? And really, really proud that we achieved that, without doubt. Whether we didn't quite get across to Australia and everything else, I think we were on the right track to doing that. But we won in terms of that battle, and the players now continually, by the looks of it, now I see it from a distance, really look like they enjoy being part of that setup.
Just going back to something you said about when you took on from Tony Smith, who I got to know Tony really well during his time at Leeds, and I actually quite felt for him during his run at England, because he was in charge of the World Cup before yours, and I remember he got absolutely vilified, and he came back and basically just isolated himself for a bit. He kept himself to himself I remember driving over and meeting him in the countryside to do his kind of first interview after he'd not spoken to the press for ages, because he was that scarred by his experience down under. Were some of the bits of advice he said to you about handling that, and how, I don't know, your relationship with the media, and I'm obviously coming at it from the media point of view, how it, as an England coach, that might be different to any job, and you got to, it might be harder for you?
I saw it firsthand, George. I was his assistant. I felt the pain for him. I saw the pain for him. As much as it hurts as an assistant, you don't know what that's like until that spotlight is on you. A lot of assistants think they're, hey, I'm ready to be an head coach and everything else. In all walks, but once that spotlight, once that media spotlight is on you, that is completely different. And I felt it. I saw it with Tony. I saw, like I said, the difficulties that he faced, and thought, if there's one area that we can improve on, we'll improve the team. That's it. Because you can't, an international team, you're not going to coach them. You're not going to fix absolutely everything. So you just look at the 2 or 3 main areas where you can get the biggest areas of improvement. And that was it. How do we get that team as a team? Rather than, some of the, as it clicks what you said, what Elle said, however Elle described it there.
Oh, the little cliques. Yeah, the club.
of not feeling part of it. Yeah. At a club, you work with each other every day, you see each other every day, you get that camaraderie. How do you do that? How do you do that when you've actually smashed each other to bits, on the Saturday, and then on the Monday you want them to stand next to each other and be best friends? And we spoke and discussed all of these things amongst our group about how we would probably respect each other more, and would improve more the harder we played against each other.
The England role for you was all centred around that World Cup on home soil in 2013. How we'll come on to that. Obviously that was one of the big broadcasting events of my life, and I can still see the try at the end of the New Zealand game every time I go to bed, which I'm sure you can as well. We'll come on to that in a moment. But as an event, how big was it for you? How excited? How ready were you for the spot?
Yeah, we were ready. No, we were ready. We had some bumps along the way, but we were ready. We were completely ready. We had a couple of incidents what people didn't meet standards at the start of that competition. I'm really proud of the fact of how we dealt with that.
That was Zach and Gareth Holt.
There was a couple there, and we didn't play some players in that first game against Australia. We left a couple of players out of the squad. We removed them from the squad, and it was the right thing. This was what it was all about. It was that they were responsible for a group of 24 players, not just the superstars, and we had to make a couple of really tough decisions. I had to make those tough decisions, and we made them, and that was all for the better of the team, all for the better of the group moving forward. It might not have helped us win that game on that day, but if we're going to be successful as an England team moving forward, some of those calls had to be made. So, but the World Cup, I'm envious of it being again. It's the best thing. It's the best thing on home soil. It's incredible. We had some great days. Australia and Cardiff. I remember playing Ireland at Huddersfield, and it was full. It was great. And Fiji, and I think we put France in the quarterfinals, and then obviously the semi-final at Wembley. But the whole event was a huge success. And for us, we were 20 seconds away from making the final.
How did you feel when it's probably the one time when I've been commentating where I've kind of, for a split second, turned into a fan rather than a commentator, because when I think it was Kevin Sinfield kind of just got caught, didn't he, flat, and New Zealand went through, and I remember kind of live on air just going, oh no. And I just could not believe it was happening again. And it was like, it's happening to England again. Yeah. Because that was the time England was so good it shouldn't have happened.
We were good. I think it was the best we'd played for so many years. Like, we were good that day. Like, we were good. And you look back and there's so many small chances. We just didn't finish the game off. It was there. It was done. You mentioned Kevin on the try. As a coach, you analyse that. It wasn't just about one person on that. So I would never. Kevin was part of that, but there were some other things in the lead up to that what could have done a whole lot better. But the ground seemed to stand still, didn't it? I remember, coming down the steps, I was just at the top of them, and it happened, and it was like silence. It was as if the world had stopped for about 5 seconds, and then restarted again. And for us to play so well in that game, and we missed that opportunity, was a sickening thing. the thing with sport at the highest level, the highest level, is that's what it's like. That is exactly how it should be. Two world-class teams at each other, right till the death, the game in the balance. And some of the reasons we put the exiles into the build-up for all of the World Cup, and I know exiles is a topic now, is that if you remember, we created that. I think the first game at Edinburgh, George Carmont scored for the exiles to win 16-12, I think it was. It was to be in those types of situations that we just, that's what top-level sport does. That's why it's so good. That's why it's so exciting. It's why it keeps us on the edge of our seat. And for me, on that day, that was nearly the pinnacle of the sport, that type of game. It was a great game, unfortunately for us, just on the wrong side of the result.
I have no idea how you were able to pick the players up after that, and not only that, you had to pick the players up and then pick yourself up. Yeah. What was the impact like of that?
Yeah, that was huge. It was the end of the tournament. It was the end of the journey that we'd been on. We felt the most frustrating thing was we felt we were capable of beating Australia the following week. Yeah, we felt like, it was the exact result, but it's what could have been. And but at the end of a tournament, that's it. You get to break up. The players get to go on holiday. It's not like a club where you're back together again. So you thank everybody for their efforts. It was a huge effort from everybody, and we'll go one better next time round. And then you start the process. You have to over the next bit. But it was difficult. It was upset. It was upsetting. There were people were crying, and I was upset. It was more for the players because I knew they were ready. Like I said, I knew they were ready. Were that close to being at the prime, some of those players at that stage, and they were ready for the big stage next week. And I remember going to the final. I think Australia won it easily, didn't they? They won that game easily, thinking what could have been.
Yeah. They were so comfortable. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't the final. I remember working on that day, thinking,
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
Chalk it off the diary. Whereas it should have been England in the final.
But we did. Again, you look back and you look at things and. Would you do things slightly different, change things and everything else? We were primed for that game, and we did. You watched the game back. We played so well, so well, but that little bit of just to finish the game off, we just missed that. We did miss that, and we live to regret that. But we move on.
It was an incredible tournament, and it was memorable, good and bad. I don't want to dwell on the stumbling blocks that you mentioned. I don't think it's the time or the place for that, but just to pick up on that, because it's a wider issue really as a coach. When the balance between player welfare, player management, and discipline, and you talked at the very start of this about being true to your values and the standards of the group. And if players, and it was Zach Hardacre and Gareth Hock, if they don't come up to it, they go. Is that hard because they were two guys with issues. Now, you want to support them. I know you're a human being. You want to help them through the problems, but at the same time, you can't have them in your squad if they're not doing as much as everyone else. If you've got 95% of your squad upholding your values and the rest aren't, they can't be there. But then there's a responsibility as a human being, isn't there?
But there is a responsibility on both that you've got to. Stick true to those values, but at the same time, you want to still support those people because ultimately they're not bad people.
No,
they just made some mistakes, but they've made some mistakes that, and you may have given opportunities and chances, and it's not just a straightforward, but you go through that process, and it is difficult. But the support for those players, quite often there is something underlying there, and that's what you need to try and get to the root of and the bottom of to help them out.
Did you look at then how they responded to what happened and hope to see that kind of response in them?
Yeah, I mean, long term you look at that. Short term you've got to make that decision. You've got to get on with some things what are immediate at that stage. But yeah, I mean, it's good to see Zach. Zach's certainly. Gareth was sort of ending towards the end of his career. Zach has reestablished himself. Come back and playing really well for Wigan. So. It's not like you dislike those people at all. It's just like you've got sometimes in the position you've got to make those decisions, and sometimes the harsher decision, the better for the player as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can give them too many opportunities. Sometimes there has to be a reality check that things have to change.
And just one more on 2013, picking up on what we said about Tony Smith's experience down under. Did then you have your first taste of that firsthand? Because I know the media laid into you because of how you handled that. Not how you handled it. It was what you said to the press. They didn't think was what was actually happening, if I recall correctly.
Well, you see, my duty there was, even though there was some discipline, I was disciplining some players, I was still going to protect those players. They were still my players. They were still my players. So, whatever happened with James Graham in for that first game is mine and James's business. If I go off and run off to the press and tell the press, I want to create that trust with James. He can trust me. Yeah, I've made a decision, but I've got you. You've made a mistake. That's it, whatever. But I've got you, and I need him to perform well for the rest of the tournament. He performed great for the rest of the tournament. And so that was between me and him. Now, the press don't like that, and you can agree whether it's the right way or the wrong way. But my duty was to make sure that playing group stayed strong with each other. They trusted me that I would, make the right decisions, but at the same time, I've got them covered still as well. And then you build that trust.
You've always struck me as a man, and even more so in this podcast, as being very steadfast in your beliefs and values. And if those will create uncomfortable moments and make things hard for you, you're all right with that, because if you're true to yourself, no one else matters. No,
I don't do social media. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't do any self-promoting stuff. I don't, I'm not interested in any of that. I'm interested in doing the job and what I do and doing it the best I can and doing it to the way I feel like it should be done. And I'm not into making statements what will please the media, statements that'll please other people, the fans, or whatever it may be. I just make the right decisions, make the right calls, make the right decisions, and maybe that's a fault, maybe it's a strength. I don't know, but that's the way it is for me.
I think most people would say it was a strength. I think I know a lot of people who would think, I wish I had that, right or wrong, that courage to kind of be true to myself on certain things, because I don't think anyone else matters. If you are genuinely true to what you were doing and saying, it doesn't actually matter what if anyone objects, well, that's them objecting. That's not you.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not easy, at times it's not, you can get tested on that and so on. But no, for me, particularly in that England group at that stage, we'd built such a tight bond, a close bond, and just had to make some good decisions at the time, and decisions that was between us and for nobody else's business. But I get it, it's sport, and there's sometimes a responsibility for the media, and people can run things the way they want, but that's the way we did it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated in that, obviously, because I've kind of got a foot in both camps. I was part of that media camp that I'm talking about, but also in more recent years, I've seen how damaging the media can be to people. I've had it myself, when they have things they want to do.
And if you break trust with people, that is the most difficult thing to get back in any relationship. You break trust with somebody, it's very hard to go back on that. And there's no way I wanted to break trust. With our playing group, we were trying to win a competition. The media, the press wasn't going to win us the games. The players was going to win us the games, and that was key for me.
Speaking of decisions, big decisions, how did you? At what point did you start to think, actually, England might be done for me now?
Well, that was a surprise in some regards. We won the Test series against New Zealand at home. What year was that? 2005. I've lost track here. 2015 was it? 2015. We performed well in that. 3-match series. Won the first one. We got beaten the second one in London at the Olympic Stadium, and then we won the third game at Wigan. So, but Nigel Wood, chief exec, made a decision at that stage. I wasn't sure. It was probably after the tournament, when it was all done and we'd won, and we were talking about what was next, and the conversations were taking a little bit longer. And as a coach, you get to sense it. Most disappointing thing for me, to this day, one of the most things that's hurt me throughout my whole career was actually sat watching television with the family in Australia and seeing it come across the bottom of the screen at the bottom, when it comes around the bottom, like on Sky News, saying that Wayne Bennett had been appointed the New England head coach. And I didn't know. I hadn't been told. So when you invest so much into something, you sacrifice so much, because you do with England, you're away for those long periods of time, and you're away from your family, and you sacrifice holidays. To learn about it that way for me was just something I've probably not really ever spoke about. Was that hurt, and to see the hurt on the kid's face was, that was the one.
To find out, and we spoke about this, I can sympathise. Finding about stuff about yourself in the media, I don't know how it happens. It's horrendous.
Yeah,
and I genuinely don't understand how that can happen, and it's hugely impactful. What was your initial reaction? How did you manage that situation? That is the first time that you've said it. That you
I was angry. I was really angry with that situation. I felt we'd done a really good job with England. And look, if someone wants to make a decision, go in a different direction, that's their prerogative to do that. But to sort of find out in that manner after that period it just made me angry. So, yeah.
How did you? I mean, personally, how did you deal with it? I don't care about what happened between you and the RFL, if anything, or whatever. I just want, as a person, how did you pick yourself up? How did you make sure you didn't go off and sulk? How did you, as someone who makes a positive from a negative, how did you make sure?
The support I had from the RFL during my time there was incredible from so many people. I thought the organisation really supported the England team as a whole. It was just it came down to myself and Nigel over this one incident. So, but no, I was disappointed. I had to deal with it. And get on with it. What can you do? That once that's done, it's done. And just that initial disappointment, but move on. Don't look backwards. Get going on to the next thing. And I was in a great place at the time with the Roosters, Sydney Roosters, and moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, what must have been a great lifestyle in Australia. I was reading up on some old interviews you'd done last night, and you're talking about, it made me so jealous, talking about getting up and winning the morning and seeing everyone in the world, it seemed, exercising at 7 in the morning. Yeah. I mean, that must be infectious in terms of the balance between your physical health and your mental health. I can't find better places to live, can there?
It's an incredible place. Anybody who knows that Sydney, that eastern suburbs area between Coogee and Bondi, and the famous walk along the cliff edge, and there's not many better places to live. So that was a bonus without a doubt. And it's just fortunate. I've worked hard and got that opportunity, and I've experienced some great places to live and work, and jobs. The England job, the NRL, both at the Roosters and the New Zealand Warriors. A tough job there at Bradford, and then a completely different job here at Catalans. Like I said, there's no different job than here.
Do you feel, you've talked about the importance of having your support network and your trust circle about it? Is that hard for you over there? I mean, I saw you last summer over in Perpignan, and I know you felt a little bit isolated because you're kind of there on your own, aren't you? Yeah,
you do at times. I mean, but it's the choice that we make. So you don't feel sorry for yourself. It's the choice that we make now. My kids, they were in Australia. I was going to New Zealand. They were at the age where they had to go back to one do A levels and one to do GCSEs. If we'd have kept them out there longer, my daughter would have gone from part English education, part Australian, part New Zealand. And again, when you talk about tough decisions to make, it was probably the wife more than anything. She made it. She thought, no, this is the right thing. We've got to go back, but we encourage you to and support you in terms of carrying on your career, which was New Zealand at first for a fair while, and obviously back now in the south of France.
Just before there's a couple of things I want to ask you just finally, but you mentioned big decisions, just one to come, and I don't want to dwell on it because you dealt with it at the time, but I guess one of the hardest things about your job there, and you will correct me if I'm wrong, was all the Israel Folau stuff that has happened this year. Now, talking of making big decisions, I'm guessing the easy decision for you would have been to say this guy isn't playing for us. This is a guy who Rugby Australia said you're not welcome here after he made homophobic comments online. You took perhaps I don't know if it's a stronger decision, you tell me, but you assessed the situation yourself and decided I'm supporting this guy. Can you just explain
Well, people can judge what type of decision that was, however they want to judge, and have their own viewpoint, and I understand his various viewpoints. The viewpoint Israel expressed is not publicly what got him into trouble is not something that I personally agree with. That's his religious belief, or whatever it may be. But my job again is to fully look at, investigate, whatever word you want to use there, the whole scenario, the whole person, the whole picture, and then to determine whether what I feel about that person, how I feel that would that impact on the group, on the area, everything else that goes with it. And every conversation I had, and I went to so much depth with it, with Israel, the people involved with him, ultimately it came down to me. I thought he deserved a second opportunity. I genuinely thought that, and I thought once I'd made that decision, it was the right direction to go in now. I get it, I understand it, and can see people would disagree with that. But again, they don't know all of the information that I know. And that if I saw it from the outside and just looked at it, I'd probably think the same thing. But that's not my job. My job then is to find out a lot more about it and a lot more about the situation, and find out what type of person Israel is. And I think with time, people will start to understand, and he may explain more, etc., as we move forward. But it's a big decision, and it created here little sleepy Catalans across here an incredible media buzz around it, and it put pressure on everybody. That was the other thing. I knew it would put pressure on everybody else, and we needed to be able to cope with that.
Yeah, the reaction was huge, and I'm sure you knew it would have been.
Yeah.
That effectively was you, again, being true to yourself. Yeah. You were putting your head on the block for someone else, which is a very, very brave thing to do.
Putting my head and probably everything else on the block in some regards. But like I said, this was not about just trying to grab a potentially world-class player and throw him in with no reasoning, no reckoning whatsoever. I understand. I get it. I understand all the work that goes on in the hard work for that the diversity areas and everything else, and I fully support all of that. But I had as my duty to investigate this properly, look at this properly, and make the right decision. And I think it is the right decision. He's back in the game, and I think over a period of time will prove his worth both on and off the field for everybody.
So, on a more general point, do you think, the kind of person who wants to help, and if someone tells you that so and so is bad news, you want to work that out for yourself? You want to find out about them. You don't take what anyone else says.
Correct. You've got to make your own decisions, your own judgments on people. You can't rely on. You might have some close confidence who know people really well, but even on the back of that, you want to sit down in front of someone, you want to meet someone, you want to speak to them, you want to make sure you can engage with them, make sure you've got a connection with somebody. Somebody might be a really, really good person, but you might not be able to get that connection because you're different types. So it's not just straight and forward. And Israel's come in and he's been an important part of the group and off the field as much as on the field.
So a couple of final points. What about you now? What about Steve McNamara now? What is your why? What's your raison d'etre? What apart from that gorgeous beach out the back gets you out of bed every day and gives you that drive and focus?
To be the first to win a grand final for Catalans. This club, in the old days, you could win the championship, and a lot of clubs have done that. And unfortunately, grand finals, there's only 4 teams won a grand final. But can we be the first? Can we be the first ever? Our first ever trophy was Wembley. That was a huge thing for this club. Very young club. We won a Challenge Cup. There's not many teams have done that in even recent history. Look outside of the major teams. I think Hull have done it, Warrington, maybe Sheffield. Way back, if you know what I mean. But there's not many teams outside of that strong 4, if you like, that have done it. So trying to create something here that can create history, we can be the first to achieve something for this club. It can be the first, it can be done. So all our drive and effort is towards trying to achieve that. And
as a person, is that the same drive, or are there, if you take your job out of the equation, do you have different drives, or is that your
no,
personal life too?
I know, like, people go, what a great place to live, what a great place to go. It'd be, how lovely it'd be, good to work out there. but it's nothing about like that for me. And I tell you, people say that and say, okay, here's a job offer, you can come and work for us. And then again, back to the original points at the start, we'll find every reason not to come out here and find the reason not to, because it's uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable, let me tell you. You coach in a country where you can't speak the language to the owner fluently. You can get by, but you can't speak fluently. Some of the players, the different cultures, the different way of doing things, the travel, everything else that goes with it. The reason why I like this, I feel it's the most challenging job in the world of rugby league, but probably one of the best jobs because of if we get that success, we'd be the first team to be able to do that on top of a Challenge Cup. Then we've really done something special.
Steve, you've been really good company. I've loved chatting to you over the last hour, so thank you very much for your time.
No worries, George. Thanks, mate.
Steve McNamara and the Rugby League United podcast will be back next week.